Racist biker punches elderly woman, unaware Barron Trump is nearby. It was a calm afternoon in downtown New York. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden glow on the city streets. The air buzzed with the usual sounds of city life, honking cars, bustling pedestrians, and the distant hum of street performers entertaining passers-by. Barron Trump walked quietly along the sidewalk, blending into the crowd in his casual outfit, jeans, a dark hoodie, and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. It was one of the few times he could enjoy some peace without the weight of constant attention. He was on his way to meet a friend for coffee when something caught his eye, a disturbance across the street. A group of bikers had gathered near a small market stall, their loud voices cutting through the usual city noise. At first, Barron thought it was just a group of friends joking around, but as he got closer, he realized something wasn't right. An elderly woman stood in front of the stall, clutching a bag of groceries. Her face was pale, and her eyes darted nervously from one biker to the next. "Come on, lady," one of the bikers sneered, stepping closer. "You think you can just ignore us?" The lead biker, a tall man with a shaved head and a leather jacket covered in patches, grinned menacingly. "Yeah, what's the matter? Too good to talk to us?" The woman tried to step back, but the biker blocked her path. "Please," she said, her voice trembling. "I just want to go home." Barron felt his pulse quicken. His instincts screamed at him to intervene, but he knew he had to assess the situation carefully. He crossed the street, keeping his distance while observing the interaction. "Go home." The lead biker laughed. "Not until you apologize. You bumped into me back there, remember? Nearly knocked me over. Pretty rude if you ask me." "I didn't mean to," the woman stammered. "I'm sorry if I caused any trouble." "Sorry isn't good enough," the biker growled. "Maybe you need a little reminder to watch where you're going." Without warning, the biker raised his hand and shoved the woman backward. She stumbled, nearly falling to the ground, her groceries scattering across the pavement. A murmur spread through the small crowd that had gathered to watch. Some people gasped in shock, but no one stepped forward to help. Barron's jaw tightened. He couldn't stand by any longer. He took a step forward, his voice steady and calm. "That's enough," he said, loud enough for the bikers to hear. The lead biker turned slowly, his eyes locking onto Barron. He smirked, sizing him up. "Oh yeah? And who are you supposed to be?" Barron stood his ground, his heart pounding. "Just someone who doesn't like bullies," he said. "Leave her alone." The other bikers chuckled, exchanging amused glances. The lead biker took a step toward Barron, his smirk widening. "You've got guts, kid. I'll give you that. But you should mind your own business. You don't want any trouble with us." Barron didn't flinch. "She's not the one causing trouble. You are." The crowd grew silent, their attention fixed on the unfolding scene. The tension in the air was palpable. The lead biker leaned in, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "You've got a big mouth for someone who doesn't know who he's messing with." Barron met his gaze, his eyes unwavering. "Maybe you're the one who doesn't know who he's messing with?" For a brief moment, the biker hesitated, sensing something unusual about the calm confidence in Barron's voice. But his pride wouldn't let him back down. "I don't care who you are," he said, raising his fist. "You're about to regret." Before he could finish, a voice from the crowd cut through the tension. "Hey, what are you doing? Leave the kid alone." A few more onlookers chimed in, emboldened by Barron's defiance. The biker glanced around, realizing that the tide was turning against him. But instead of backing off, he doubled down. "Stay out of this," he barked at the crowd, his eyes darting between Barron and the elderly woman. Barron took a deep breath, preparing for what might come next. He wasn't afraid to stand up for what was right, no matter the cost. He glanced at the elderly woman, offering a reassuring nod. "It's going to be okay," he said quietly. The biker growled in frustration, his fists clenched. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by a kid half his size. "You're making a big mistake," he muttered, his eyes narrowing. "No," Barron replied calmly. "You are." The crowd continued to grow, murmurs of concern spreading as more onlookers gathered around the scene. The lead biker, still clenching his fists, glanced at his friends for backup. One of them, a younger man with a scruffy beard, stepped forward. "Boss, let's just go." "It's not worth it," he muttered under his breath, his eyes darting nervously toward the crowd. But the lead biker, fueled by arrogance and pride, refused to back down. He jabbed a finger in Barron's direction. "You think you're some kind of hero, kid? Standing up for strangers like you're in some movie?" "I'm just doing what anyone should do," Barron said, his voice calm but firm. "Standing up to bullies like you?" The biker's face flushed red with anger. He was losing control of the situation, and he hated it. Without warning, he lunged at Barron, shoving him backward. Barron stumbled but kept his footing, his eyes still locked on the biker. Gasps echoed through the crowd. A few people pulled out their phones, recording the unfolding drama. Barron straightened, refusing to show any sign of fear. He could feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins, but he kept his emotions in check. "You don't want to do this," he said quietly. The biker laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Oh, and why's that?" "Because you're about to make the biggest mistake of your life," Barron said, his eyes unwavering. At that moment, a voice broke through the crowd, a voice that carried authority and strength. "What's going on here?" The crowd parted as a man in a suit stepped forward, flanked by two uniformed officers. The man's eyes scanned the scene, quickly taking in the situation. His gaze settled on Barron, and recognition flashed across his face. "Mr. Trump," the man said, his voice filled with surprise and concern. The lead biker froze, his smug expression quickly replaced by confusion. "Trump?" Barron didn't respond. He didn't need to. The crowd's whispers grew louder as people began to put the pieces together. "That's Barron Trump," someone said, their voice barely above a whisper. "The son of the former First Lady." The lead biker's face went pale. His bravado crumbled as the realization hit him like a freight train. He had just attacked one of the most well-known figures in the country, and it was all caught on camera. The suited man, who turned out to be a security official assigned to oversee public safety in the area, stepped between Barron and the biker. "Step back," he said firmly, his eyes locked on the biker. "You're done here." The two officers quickly moved in, grabbing the biker by the arms. "You're under arrest for assault and public disturbance," one of them said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. The biker didn't even bother to resist. His friends had already begun to scatter, slipping away into the crowd in a desperate attempt to avoid being caught. Barron watched as the officers led the biker away, his heart finally beginning to slow down. He turned to the elderly woman, who was still clutching her bag of groceries, her eyes wide with shock. "Are you okay?" Barron asked gently. The woman nodded, her hands trembling. "Thanks to you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't stepped in." Barron smiled, offering her a reassuring nod. "I'm glad you're safe." The crowd began to disperse, the tension in the air slowly giving way to a sense of relief. A few people approached Barron, thanking him for his bravery, but he waved them off politely. He wasn't looking for attention or praise. He had just done what he believed was right. By the time Barron made it back home that evening, the incident had already begun to make headlines. News outlets ran clips from the videos recorded by onlookers, praising his quick thinking and courage. Melania was waiting for him in the living room, her arms crossed and a concerned expression on her face. "Barron," she said as he stepped through the door. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," he said, dropping his backpack onto the floor. "It got a little crazy, but everything's under control now." Melania exhaled, relief washing over her face. "I saw the news. You handled yourself well, but you scared me. What happened?" Barron recounted the story, telling her everything from the moment he noticed the bikers harassing the elderly woman to the moment the police arrived. Melania listened carefully, her expression shifting between concern and pride. "You did the right thing," she said when he finished. "But you put yourself at risk. Promise me you'll be more careful in the future." "I will," Barron said. "But I couldn't just stand there and do nothing." Melania nodded. "I know. That's what makes you special, you're brave and kind. But sometimes bravery means knowing when to ask for help." Barron smiled. "I'll remember that." The next day, the story continued to dominate the news cycle. Social media lit up with praise for Barron, calling him a hero. The elderly woman, whose name was revealed to be Mrs. Harper, appeared in an interview expressing her gratitude. "He was my guardian angel," Mrs. Harper said, her eyes welling up with tears. "I don't know what I would have done without him. He didn't hesitate for a second. He just stepped in and protected me." Barron watched the interview from the living room, feeling a mix of emotions. He was glad Mrs. Harper was okay, but the attention was overwhelming. He had never been one to seek the spotlight. Later that evening, he received a call from an unknown number. Curious, he answered. "Barron? This is Chief Reynolds from the NYPD. I just wanted to personally thank you for your bravery yesterday. Not everyone would have had the courage to do what you did." Barron felt a warm surge of pride. "Thank you, Chief. I just did what I thought was right." "Well, what you did made a difference," Chief Reynolds said. "We need more people like you in the world." The next morning, Barron woke to find his phone buzzing nonstop. Notifications from news outlets, social media, and messages from friends filled the screen. The video of the altercation had gone viral overnight, and the headlines were impossible to ignore. Barron Trump confronts violent biker to protect elderly woman. Heroic moment. Barron Trump's calm bravery caught on camera. Former first son saves the day in NYC incident. Barron rubbed his eyes, scrolling through the flood of messages. His classmates had sent texts congratulating him, while family friends expressed their admiration. But it wasn't the praise that stuck with him. It was the realization of how quickly something could spiral out of control. He headed downstairs, where Melania was already seated at the breakfast table, a cup of coffee in her hand. She looked up as he entered, her expression a mixture of concern and pride. "Good morning," she said softly. "Did you see the news?" Barron nodded, pouring himself a glass of orange juice. "It's everywhere." Melania motioned for him to sit. "Are you okay with all this attention? It can be overwhelming." "I'm fine," Barron said, though he wasn't entirely sure how he felt. "I just didn't expect it to get this big." Melania reached across the table, placing a hand on his. "What you did was brave, Barron. But moments like these can define you. How you choose to respond will be just as important as what happened." Barron nodded thoughtfully. "I don't want this to be about me. It's not like I was trying to be a hero. I just couldn't let that woman get hurt." "That's exactly why people admire you," Melania said. "Because you acted out of kindness and courage, not for attention." As the day went on, news crews gathered outside their home, hoping for a statement. Reporters peppered questions at anyone who walked by, desperate for a new angle on the story. Barron did his best to ignore it, focusing on his schoolwork and keeping to himself. But it was impossible to avoid the growing buzz. The phone calls kept coming. Journalists, public figures, even a few celebrities who wanted to congratulate him personally. Later that afternoon, Chief Reynolds called again, inviting Barron and Melania to an upcoming community event. "We're honoring local heroes," the chief explained. "We'd love for you to attend. It's a chance to recognize not just you, but others who've made a difference in our community." Barron hesitated. The idea of standing on a stage and being publicly recognized made him uncomfortable. But Melania encouraged him. "This isn't about fame," she said. "It's about showing others that doing the right thing matters." Reluctantly, Barron agreed. The day of the event arrived quickly. The community center was filled with people from all walks of life, city officials, police officers, local activists, and families who had come to show their support. A large banner hung above the stage, honoring everyday heroes. Barron sat quietly in the front row with Melania by his side, listening as the mayor gave a speech about the importance of courage and compassion. One by one, local heroes were called to the stage: firefighters who had saved lives, volunteers who had dedicated their time to helping the homeless, and teachers who had gone above and beyond for their students. Finally, it was Barron's turn. The room erupted in applause as he walked to the podium, his heart pounding in his chest. He took a deep breath, scanning the sea of faces before him. His eyes caught Mrs. Harper's in the front row, and she gave him an encouraging nod. "Thank you," Barron began, his voice steady despite the nerves bubbling beneath the surface. "I'm honored to be here today, but I want to start by saying that I don't see myself as a hero. What I did was something anyone should do when they see someone in trouble." The room fell silent, hanging on his every word. We live in a world where it's easy to turn away, to ignore what's happening around us. But I've learned that true strength comes from standing up, not just for yourself, but for others. Mrs. Harper didn't deserve what happened to her, and if I hadn't stepped in, I would have regretted it forever. He paused, glancing at Mrs. Harper. But this isn't just about that moment. It's about how we choose to live our lives. We can be bystanders, or we can be the people who make a difference. We all have that choice. The crowd erupted into applause once again, rising to their feet in a standing ovation. Barron felt a wave of emotion wash over him, pride, relief, and a deep sense of purpose. After the event, dozens of people approached him, thanking him for his bravery and sharing their own stories of standing up for what was right. Barron listened to each one, humbled by their experiences and grateful for the connections being made. Mrs. Harper hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face. "You're an incredible young man," she said. "You'll never know how much what you did means to me." "It was the least I could do," Barron replied. "I'm just glad you're okay." As the evening wound down, Barron and Melania stood near the entrance, watching the crowd slowly filter out. The mayor approached, shaking Barron's hand. "You've got a bright future ahead of you," he said. "If you ever decide to go into public service, let me know." Barron chuckled. "I'll keep that in mind." The next few weeks were quieter. The media frenzy died down, replaced by the next big story. Life returned to a semblance of normalcy, but the experience had changed Barron in ways he hadn't expected. He found himself thinking more about how he could make a difference, not just in moments of crisis, but in everyday life. He started volunteering at local shelters, helping out at community events, and speaking at schools about the importance of standing up for others. Each time, he carried with him the lessons he had learned from that day: the power of courage, the value of kindness, and the strength that comes from doing what's right, no matter the cost. And while the headlines faded and the world moved on, Barron knew that moment on the street would stay with him forever, a reminder that even the smallest actions can have the biggest impact. Life in the weeks following the community event settled into a peaceful rhythm. Barron found himself balancing schoolwork, family time, and something he hadn't expected, a growing sense of responsibility to use his voice for good. The media attention had mostly faded, but the impact of the incident remained fresh in his mind. It wasn't about the headlines or the viral videos anymore. What truly stuck with Barron were the stories he'd heard at the community event, from people who had faced injustice and had no one to stand up for them. That evening on the street had been a turning point, not just for him but for how he saw the world. He couldn't forget the fear in Mrs. Harper's eyes, the way the crowd had hesitated to help until someone took the first step. It made him realize just how important it was to act, even when it wasn't easy. One Friday afternoon, Barron walked into the school's community service club meeting. It wasn't something he had planned to join initially, but after the past few weeks, it felt like the right place to be. The room was small, filled with folding chairs and a handful of students chatting quietly. A tall girl with curly hair stood at the front, organizing papers. She looked up as Barron entered, her eyes widening slightly. "Hey, you're Barron, right?" she asked. "Yeah," he said, offering a small smile. "Is this the community service club?" "It is," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Natalie, the club president." "Welcome." Barron shook her hand, feeling a little out of place but determined to stick with it. He took a seat near the back, listening as Natalie explained the club's upcoming projects, organizing food drives, helping out at local shelters, and planning fundraisers for underserved schools. "We're always looking for new ideas," Natalie said, glancing around the room. "If anyone has suggestions, feel free to share." Barron raised his hand hesitantly. "What about a mentorship program? For kids who might need a little extra support, someone to talk to or help with schoolwork?" Natalie's eyes lit up. "That's a great idea. We've talked about something like that before, but it never really got off the ground. If you're willing to help organize it, we could make it happen." "I'd love to," Barron said, feeling a surge of excitement. Over the next few weeks, Barron threw himself into the project. He reached out to teachers, community leaders, and local organizations, building a network of mentors and volunteers. The response was overwhelmingly positive. The mentorship program launched at the start of the next semester, bringing together students from different backgrounds and giving them a safe space to connect, learn, and grow. Barron spent countless hours at the center, working with younger students and helping them build confidence in their abilities. One afternoon, he sat across from a boy named Jaden, who was struggling with his math homework. "I'm never going to get this," Jaden muttered, frustration evident in his voice. "Sure you will," Barron said, leaning in. "It's just like solving a puzzle. Let's break it down piece by piece." Jaden hesitated, then nodded slowly. With Barron's guidance, he worked through the problem, his face lighting up when he finally got the right answer. "I did it," Jaden said, grinning from ear to ear. "Told you you could," Barron said with a smile. Moments like that reminded Barron why he had started this journey in the first place. It wasn't about grand gestures or public recognition. It was about making a difference in small, meaningful ways. Meanwhile, Melania watched her son's transformation with quiet pride. She had always known he was strong and kind, but seeing him grow into a leader filled her heart with joy. One evening, she found him in the living room, sketching out ideas for the mentorship program's next event. "You've been working hard," she said, sitting beside him. "How's it going?" "Good," Barron said, showing her his notes. "We're planning a workshop on public speaking and self-confidence. A lot of the kids have trouble expressing themselves, so I thought it could help." Melania nodded thoughtfully. "That's a wonderful idea. Confidence is one of the most powerful tools you can have." Barron leaned back, tapping his pen against the notebook. "It's funny. I never thought I'd be doing something like this. But it feels... That's because it is," Melania said, smiling. "You've found your purpose?" Word about the mentorship program spread quickly. Local news outlets featured it in their community segments, praising Barron and the other volunteers for their dedication. Schools from neighboring districts reached out, asking for advice on starting similar programs. One day, while Barron was helping a group of students prepare for an upcoming science fair, he received a call from Chief Reynolds. "Barron, I've been hearing great things about your mentorship program," the chief said. "You're really making a difference." "Thank you, Chief," Barron said. "It's been a team effort." "Well, I wanted to invite you to speak at the city's annual Youth Leadership Summit," Chief Reynolds continued. "We think your story could inspire a lot of young people." Barron paused, taken aback. He had spoken at the community event before, but this felt different, bigger, more formal. "I'd be honored," he said finally. The day of the summit arrived quickly. Held in a large auditorium, the event drew hundreds of students, teachers, and community leaders. Barron stood backstage, taking deep breaths as he waited for his turn. When his name was called, he walked onto the stage, the spotlight bright but not overwhelming. He glanced at the crowd, his nerves fading as he began to speak. "Good afternoon," he said, his voice clear and steady. "I'm here today because I believe in the power of small actions. Sometimes, we think that making a difference requires something huge, something dramatic. But I've learned that it's the little things that matter most." He paused, letting the words sink in. It's standing up for someone who needs help. It's taking the time to listen. It's believing in people even when they don't believe in themselves. We all have the power to do those things. And when we do, we create a ripple effect that can change lives. The audience listened intently, their faces reflecting a mix of admiration and inspiration. "My journey started with a single moment, a moment I didn't expect, but one that changed everything," Barron continued. "And what I've learned is that you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to care." The auditorium erupted into applause, a standing ovation that lasted longer than Barron expected. He felt a wave of emotion wash over him, gratitude, pride, and a deep sense of fulfillment. As the summit ended and people began to leave, Barron found himself surrounded by students and teachers eager to share their stories and thank him for his words. He listened to each one, humbled by their kindness. Later that evening, as he and Melania drove home, Barron stared out the window, reflecting on everything that had happened over the past year. "You've grown so much," Melania said softly. "I'm proud of you, Barron." Barron smiled. "Thanks, Mel. I couldn't have done it without you." Melania reached over, giving his hand a gentle squeeze. "The world is lucky to have you." Barron leaned back, watching the city lights blur past. For the first time in a long time, he felt at peace, not because everything was perfect, but because he had found his place in the world. And he knew deep down that this was just the beginning.